Last week, we delved into the story of how Edward, the Prince of Wales, later known as the Duke of Windsor, captivated the heart of the married American woman, Wallis Simpson, by showering her with an increasingly opulent array of gemstones and jewelry. The more Wallis attempted to distance herself, the more determined Edward became. This culminated on June 3, 1937, when the couple made the bold decision to abandon any hopes of societal approval, respectability, or even their claims to the throne, and tied the knot. With this, Edward had achieved his desired outcome. However, the lavish gifts of jewelry didn't cease. As described here, the Duchess of Windsor amassed one of the most astonishing jewelry collections globally, featuring truly extraordinary pieces. After her passing, her jewelry was sold for over £100 million in today's currency. At 11:55 p.m. on January 20, 1936, George V passed away at Sandringham. As his mother and later his brothers welcomed him as the new king, Edward couldn't hold back his tears. Losing a parent is a profound turning point in anyone's life, yet Edward's situation was further complicated by his relationship with Wallis Simpson. She was already divorced and now married to another man, adding an extra layer of sorrow. It's believed that Edward, also known as David within his family, had envisioned George V's reign continuing for some time, during which Wallis could finalize her divorce from her second husband, Ernest, and marry her third, Edward. In Edward's mind, such a sequence of events might have led Wallis to automatically assume the role of queen. This scenario would likely have been easier to defend than the reality he now faced. As he had done on numerous occasions before, Edward tried to address his problems by offering jewelry gifts. In early February 1936, Edward's determination to marry Wallis became evident to her estranged husband, Ernest Simpson, during a dinner with the new king. Edward had already disregarded various conventions and seemed more than willing to disregard more. For instance, he had arranged for Wallis to witness his proclamation as Garter King of Arms at St. James's Palace shortly after his accession. At the last moment, he chose to position himself right next to her. It's important to remember that these were very different times. In February, Queen Mary, his mother, mentioned to her lady-in-waiting, Lady Airlie, that she couldn't broach the subject of Mrs. Simpson with her son. She explained that opposing him would only strengthen his resolve to pursue his intentions. Meanwhile, his gifts to Wallis grew increasingly expensive and significant in terms of jewelry. We gain some insight into the details of these individual pieces from the Jewels of the Duchess of Windsor, the catalogue of her jewelry sold at Sotheby's in 1987. As we observed last week, the jewels he had given Wallis before becoming king were beautiful but limited in scope, mainly consisting of bejeweled or gold charms and small diamond dress or hair clips. A turning point occurred with a Cartier emerald and diamond bracelet he presented to her in 1935. Upon becoming king, the magnitude of his gifts continued to escalate. One possible motive might have been Edward's perception that, despite his determination, Wallis harbored doubts about their future together. She was, after all, not lacking in intelligence. In March 1936, she embarked on a trip to Paris with a friend. Upon her return, Edward gifted her a lavish ruby and diamond bracelet from Van Cleef and Arpels. This marked the first instance of rubies in his gifts, and they were exquisite Burmese rubies, symbolizing passion and love. The bracelet was inscribed with the words, "Hold tight 27A36. Was this a message to encourage her patience? The date referred to a weekend they spent with friends at Fort Belvedere, Edward's favorite residence in Windsor Great Park. Ernest Simpson was also among the guests. After all, the Simpsons were still officially married at the time. This bracelet fetched nearly £400,000 when it was sold in 1987, nearly doubling its pre-sale estimate. For her 40th birthday in June of that year, Wallis received more rubies in the form of a bib necklace from Van Cleef and Arpels. According to Sam Gillespie of the Beaumonde blog, these rubies had been given to Edward during his tour of India in 1921. Could it be that he had been holding onto these magnificent gems for his one true love? The clasp bore his characteristic touch, engraved with the words, "My Wallis from her David." After a dinner with the couple a few weeks later, diarist Chips Cannon noted that Mrs. Simpson was literally smothered in rubies. As we learned previously that summer, the king and Wallis were seen on vacation wearing matching Cartier crosses, his on a necklace and hers on a bracelet. The British press have largely refrained from reporting on their relationship at the royal family's request, hoping it would simply fade away. However, in 1936, foreign press outlets published photographs of them together during their summer getaway, commenting on the king's unconventional choice of attire. He was pictured wearing espadrilles and shorts, with his shirt open to reveal the chain holding the 3 Cartier crosses. On October 27, 1936, perhaps the most significant and life-altering gift arrived: Wallis Simpson's engagement ring from King Edward VI. It was remarkable not only for its consequences, but also for its setting. Francesca Cartier-Britell, in her comprehensive family biography, notes that in the early 1930s, Jacques Cartier, her great-grandfather, dispatched a salesman to Baghdad to acquire several important gemstones. Despite the substantial sum of money provided, the employee returned with only one small pouch, containing a single precious gemstone. This emerald, described as so magnificent it had once belonged to the great Mughal, and roughly the size of an egg according to the auction catalogue, was an exquisite find. Yet Jacques Cartier was disappointed. Nobody seemed willing to buy such a gemstone, especially in the wake of Russia's upheaval. However, this invaluable emerald found its purpose as the centerpiece of Wallis Simpson's engagement ring. The history it carried and the significance it held made it a truly exceptional gift, transcending the material value. This partially gilt silver penannular bangle, crafted by Cartier, is described in the 1987 catalog as having been inspired by North African motifs, adorned with 3 rows of gilt beads. Its interior bears the engraving "For a Happier New Year NASA U 1-141. This piece is perhaps one of her more understated jewels, and for good reason. The significance of the date offers a clue to the absence of gemstones. In August 1940, they set sail for the Bahamas, where the Duke of Windsor was appointed governor and commander-in-chief for the duration of the war. In order to avoid undue attention, the couple wisely chose not to flaunt ostentatious jewelry. During their time in the Bahamas, Wallis became deeply involved in enhancing the decor of Government House in Nassau, along with contributing to the efforts of the Bahamian Red Cross. In a July 1943 article for American Vogue, she expressed her desire to dress neat, appropriate, and inconspicuous, avoiding sensational attire. Though simple in design, the bracelet commanded a price of £24,897 in the 1987 auction. Cartier ingeniously divided the remarkable emerald into 2 exquisite stones, each polished into its own breathtaking gem. King Edward acquired one of these 19.77-carat emeralds to serve as the centerpiece of an engagement ring for the love of his life. As we've observed, we became a symbol of their profound love, likely coined by the Prince of Wales. It first appeared in her jewelry in November 1934, with "We are 225XI34 engraved on the back of the initial platinum Cartier Latin cross she wore on a bracelet. In a significant twist of fate, October 27, 1936 marked the start of Wallis's divorce proceedings with Ernest Simpson, a process far more arduous than today's standards. The government, led by Stanley Baldwin, was determined that the adored king would not marry this twice-divorced woman. However, Edward had his own plans. He was even willing to relinquish the throne to be with Wallis, convinced that they could have a morganatic marriage, a legally recognized union that excluded her from his titles and possessions. He hoped she might attain a lesser title, perhaps a duchess. During this period, Wallis had relocated to the south of France, accompanied by Edward's friend, Peregrine, Lord Brownlow. On December 10, 1936, Edward formally abdicated, a heart-wrenching moment for all, particularly Wallis, who wept as she listened to the broadcast with friends at a villa. Returning to the status of a prince, Edward left England that night, seeking exile in Austria. He was only reunited with Wallis after her decree absolute was granted 5 months later. During their separation, Edward sent her small charms with intimate engravings. Upon their reunion, he presented her with a Cartier cocktail ring, featuring a turban design adorned with rubies and sapphires. The shank bore inscriptions of their separation dates and our reunion in Canada, the chateau where they would marry a month later. Estimated at 22,000 to 28,000 Swiss francs, the ring sold for £143,000 in 1987. Following their marriage and his abdication, a striking transformation occurred in Wallis's jewelry style. It deviated significantly from her previous acquisitions and from traditional royal collections worldwide. No longer limited to conventional necklaces and bracelets adorned with diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and emeralds, her jewelry became a fantastical treasure trove, diverging from the crown and family jewels that now belonged to Queen Elizabeth and the Queen Mother. The royal collection includes Faberge's hard-stone animals, a prime example being those crafted for Queen Mary. However, Wallis's adoration for exotic creatures, evident in her 1937 trousseau adorned with butterflies and turtles, led to the creation of a bejeweled menagerie. These pieces proudly adorned her couture garments. Among her most recognizable jewels is Cartier's exquisite flamingo. Composed of rubies, diamonds, sapphires, amethysts, and emeralds, its beak is fashioned from a cabochon citrine and a sapphire. Crafted by Jean Toussaint, this piece made its debut on the Duchess of Windsor at the Ritz Hotel in Madrid on the Duke's 46th birthday in June 1940. Sold for 1.2 million Swiss francs in 1987, the flamingo exceeded its estimate of 140,000 SF by a considerable margin. In 2010, it was acquired at Sotheby's for £1.7 million, equivalent to over £4.6 million today. Another remarkable avian creation, Cartier's bird of paradise, unfortunately fell victim to theft in 1946 and was never recovered. Soon after, Cartier introduced the first of its iconic Great Cat jewels, starting with an outstretched golden panther seated atop an emerald cabochon. The catalog lists 7 lots of Cartier cats, including a 1957 onyx and diamond panther bracelet with marquise-cut emerald eyes, sold for £4.5 million in 2010, equivalent to £12 million today. These sums are substantial, yet when asked about the expenditure, Anna Pasternak, biographer of the American Duchess, shared that she believed the Duke aimed to bestow upon his beloved the jewels she deserved as Queen of England. Such a gesture speaks volumes about their enduring love story, a sentiment that anyone who believes in romance can surely appreciate. Dear friend, if you like everything new about the royal family and don't want to miss all the novelties, subscribe to our channel and like it. By doing so, you take part in our development. We work for you.